Here. Welcome back to the committee. Here. Just a note, next item, apologies for absence. None received? No, okay. Next is the minutes of the previous meeting, 17th of April. Any comments on that? All happy to agree? Agreed? Okay, sign those. Next, disclosure of members' interests. Declare? No. Right. Item 5, board plan of cabinet decisions. Sure.
Yeah, just to point out to members, the floor plan is presented in two parts. The first part is decisions the cabinet have made. So you've got the cabinet decisions of in May and June, and then the floor plan, as you know it, of forthcoming cabinet decisions. Well, obviously we've done that split as part of the new ways of working, so that as you move away from pre-scrutiny, you're still monitoring the decisions of cabinet.
Noted. Next, item 6. Now, this is presentations from executive directors on forthcoming issues. And which of you want to say a couple of words about this?
Thank you, Chair. No, not on this one. I'll leave this one to directors. I'll talk about financial outturn and wellness.
Okay, thanks. So, which of you got your slides teed up first then?
Simon, please.
Simon, yours teed up, ready to go?
Yep, thank you and good morning, members. Just to introduce myself to those who haven't yet met, Simon Nielsen, I'm the new Executive Director for Place and Regeneration. If we just flick on one slide, please. Just wanted to start by setting the context of the overall directorate that I'm responsible for and the elements which face into your committee this morning. So from the left-hand side, the economic development and growth agenda is in particular a focus for your committee. So Janice and Sarah and the teams there. Tourism faces more into communities and place. And then in the middle section, strategic transport recently moved as part of our tier 3 and tier 4 realignment. So that is now with Paul in Paul's team and through David Lawks as our head of service in that area. So the two major components, economic growth and regeneration and strategic transport coming into this committee. And then just to complete the set, Rob's area looks after housing and planning. Again, that all faces into communities and place scrutiny committee. If you can move on one slide, please. Just wanted to illustrate how that then fits at a portfolio level. So most of the business concerns the business and opportunities portfolio at cabinet level. There are elements which fall to the leaders portfolio, particularly our work on devolution. I'll come back to that in a moment. Borderlands, and then the Joint Transport Committee through the region as well. And as I say in the bottom bullet point, most other areas of the directorate and other portfolios face to communities and place, and that includes as well, I should have said, Councillor Watson's portfolio around tourism and culture, which all goes there as well. So that relates back to the previous slide around my overall directorate responsibilities. And then just wanted to finish this morning on the next slide, please. Just to flag up 4 areas where I think and our team thinks scrutiny attention might be most worthwhile in the forthcoming year as you set your work programme. So the first around devolution and the new North East Mayoral Combined Authority. In particular, we've enjoyed a good relationship at a North of Tyne level for a few years, and we are now moving towards following all of the cabinet decisions to agree to the Minded To deal and the dissolution of that arrangement and creation of the new Mayoral Combined Authority. We're moving towards that wider regional picture, and obviously there are opportunities in that wider work for us as a place and as a council. So an area that you may wish to consider focusing on. Of course, a lot of our work in that area concerns transport, and major transport schemes within our county are important to the rest of the region. Northumberland Line, of course, everyone will know very well. Blythe Relief Road, other big strategic transport schemes. And what I'm mindful of here is cross-border issues where our devolution voice can be amplified. So, for example, Moor Farm and Seaton Burn roundabout, a key regional priority for all of us to unlock in the next funding round of Highways England, or National Highways as they are now called, forgive me. The third bullet point then is around our major work on regeneration. Lots of the place programs that we have underway, a lot of the DLUC investment from housing and local government around future high streets fund, levelling up funds, deep dive, energising Blythe, all of those collections of interest for the committee. And then as distinct from that, the Borderlands Partnership, which has a separate funding stream attached to it and where we can promote projects recently with Ad Gefren and with Lilladori, but also place programme opportunities for some of our smaller towns within the county, where we can collect together regeneration and economic development programmes that wouldn't otherwise fit with some of those national schemes that maybe through the devolution deal and through regeneration directly into government we would see coming into the county in terms of investment. So they're the four areas that I suggest that you may wish to focus on, and we can organise our work and delivery of that work to the committee accordingly. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, members, that's a brief overview of the new structure there for that directorate. Do we have any questions or getting that raised? Oh, Alex?
Chair, if I may, I'm looking for the microphone,
Oh,
sorry.
yes, following you around the room.
Sorry, no, Chair, if I may, more for discussion than anything else. I represent the Sleepburn ward. The 2 years I've been a county councillor, there's been something happening within 400 yards of where I live, where I represent the Sleepburn ward. Unless Advanced Northumberland come up here once a year and make a presentation, unless I listen to Radio Newcastle, unless I read the journal, I haven't got a clue what's going on with major investment from the government, allegedly, from this council, definitely, as to what's happening in Energy Central. Today, I'm hearing about offices being raided for fraud, and I'm hoping that 3,000 jobs has come to my area, and I've got no answers to anybody who picks up the phone or bumps into me in a corner shop or in the bar. Now, this is scrutiny. Where is it that I can scrutinise to find solutions, to find answers? I hope you understand my frustration, Chair, because it is. I've sat at meetings in the chambers where I've said Sleepburn will be the jewel of the crown for this authority, and it will be. I was on my prayer mat for British Hockey Cup, and we've had so many false stones in that commissariat, Chair. Frustration is rife.
Yeah,
thank you, Chair. I totally agree with Alex. I mean, saying on the news again, and it could be 3 or 4 week delay, but that's not giving any faith in the residents we represent about jobs and about this wonderful, exciting building coming in with jobs and people being able to get trades, etc., etc. And it's so frustrating because we represent residents who were getting excited because we thought that initially we're going to get British Vault, that folded, and now it looks as though for whatever reason, I don't know if Richard is a portfolio that could give an update, but now we're seeing 2 to 3 weeks that we could be hearing some exciting news, but really that isn't good enough for the residents, especially for the ward that Alex represents and for the wider public, for the jobs, but it's also exciting being able to justify 3,000 jobs in our area, which is very, very badly needed. Thanks, Chair.
thank you. I think just to remind the councillors, obviously this is a live issue and there will be commercial sensitivities. So I'd ask you to avoid speculating about matter, but yes, it's a very important issue. Richard, did you have anything just to you can say?
Well, and it's obviously you said part of what I was going to say, which is that there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, but there's a lot. Obviously, council can show council that you can't say until such a time as something concludes and we move to another stage with the site. It's a fantastic site. It will be the jewel of the crown. Absolutely correct on that. And I think that it is worth bearing in mind that regardless of what the current situation is on net 3. There's lots of work going on net 1. You should be seeing significant progress on the JDR cables site, and there's a lot of commercial discussion on the net 2 site, and which is another of the parts that make up that wider land portfolio. So I think that all I can say at the moment is that I would just urge patience, because getting it right is absolutely the most important thing, and not rushing to make more comment than I've been able to there. I would pick up, I don't know if Simon might like to comment on this, but you did mention advance and getting updates from Advance Northumberland, and I would urge you to do that. I think that they are, if I understand correctly, Chair, they're going to come once or twice a year. Was that your intention? I mean, it's not for me to dictate that to you. That's for you to decide
yes,
what you want to happen here. So that would be highly logical. So I leave that for you to pass on that.
Thanks. Councillor Brown, say something, I'll get back to Sir.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's for this committee. We've worked very well with North of Tyne combined different funding schemes, regeneration, tourism, etc. How do you see the transition? I know there's going to be a lot more money coming in, and obviously the people who are working in North of Tyne and those departments at the minute, will they be transferred over? And how do you see the transition between the devolution side, 6 areas, and the North of Tyne? Do you see that a smooth transition? Because there are projects which will be going through the transition period.
Good question. Simon, let's look at the comments on that.
Yep, of course. So on devolution, I'll come back to Advance, and maybe Jan will want to cover some of that as well. Devolution, yes, there are things that the North of Tyne are responsible for together with us that will transcend the timeline. So they're all being attended to, and we're very careful about accounting and monitoring and output monitoring and the like. How we work with the wider region will be important. We've got a good track record. I think if I can speak for officers who've been part of the team prior to my arrival, we've got a good track record from an officer perspective of working very closely with the region. I've worked with a number of the colleagues, our chief executive and other levels around the region and other parts of the country as well. So I'm optimistic that we have good relationships to build upon, both from the local perspective and that more national perspective. And let's not forget, of course, this opens up greater opportunity for more funding for projects and programs within the county, which we can enjoy and facilitate on our behalf for future. So I'm optimistic that transition will be handled well. It's very clearly a key priority for our chief executive colleagues across the region, and there's a healthy relationship between all of the different authorities within the region to make that work leading into next year. On Advance, I guess that is a 2-part answer. We obviously work very closely with Advance to progress a number of the regeneration schemes, some of which have already been talked about in the room. But in terms of a governance and finance perspective, I know Jan wanted to cover our relationship with Advance in Jan's presentation as well, so it might be better to leave some of that for Jan.
Thanks very much. Well, I think, Michael.
Just for my topics, you know, the street councillors here with a very local responsibility for that kind of site. Collectively, we're all hoping it goes ahead, and it's a big part of this council. And you know, we keep hearing that there's matters of confidentiality. Well, that's fine, but we could have a closed session. We could hear it behind closed session, so we know what's going on. Because personally, and I know this time we haven't had as much input as the last time, but we still have a place on the table. I'll be asking about due diligence and things like that. So there's certainly questions to be asked on behalf of our local residents, who hopefully will benefit mainly from this development, if we ever see it happen. But as I say, we could hold it behind a closed session.
Yes, I mean, certainly, I think the mood of the committee, Richard and Simon, is that once there is something to report, that it does come here on pink papers, and if that's sensible, just so the committee are kept in the loop about what is happening. But while it's all up in the air, there's point of speculating, but if and when a deal is done, then I think it should be reported to this committee so that we can ask the right questions. Is that, what's the issue with that, David?
Can I, Chair, through you, can I just suggest to Simon and Jan, who've been key parts to the discussions that have been going on, that we maybe touch base tomorrow and work out what we can say at the next overview scrutiny meeting, but I would say that it would need to be in closed session. We're going to discuss anything that's commercial in confidence, and even then we just have to make sure that I'm sure that we can do everything we can within that discussion, but I just have to make sure that there's not anything in there in terms of non-disclosure agreements and this and that and all of those. It's not how we keep data. I'll be a little bit, make sure we get that right. I'm going to want to launch into it with your kind permission today. But no, I think
yeah,
if we want to discuss that, it would be better discussed next time and then us be able to.
In that case, what I propose is that we put on the agenda for the next meeting, a pink paper's short report on update on what's going on. Would that be agreed? Agreed, okay, agreed, thank you.
Chair, can I make this a policy that for this committee? Because the strategic decisions being made that we're supposed to scrutinise and test, which we don't, basically. Now, anything in our remit, I would suggest if we have to have it on pink papers, we get it on pink papers. You know, anything. But there's a big decision going to be made, which will impact on the whole of the council, not just our area very soon. And, you know, we want to be able to test that.
Yeah, I agree. I think obviously we want to have as much as we can in open session. Later than we can't, but for commercial or other reasons, then we will bring on pink papers.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously we want to do as much in open session as possible. That's how we want the council to work. And in terms of scrutiny, you know, Councillor Robinson, the best ways for sort of some early flag that you want to see something on that, and then we can prepare it for you accordingly. So I'm sure that we can turn that around in time between now and the next.
Well, that's going to be part of.
Yeah.
We hope how scrutiny is going to change.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's how I hope scrutiny will change, because it is so much better that you look at things that are important to your areas and wards and divisions, rather than simply look at papers that are going to count because of week's time and stuff like that.
Just a quick add-on. In a recent local area, or now committees and not councils, that reported to the secretariat, I would like a report to come to ours, which is the Ashton and Blythe, would include other places such as Sleepers. Odd name that, but never mind. I would like reports brought to us on Entry Central. So I'm going back to what I said 15 minutes ago, because I haven't got a clue what's going on. And yet I go in my back garden and I can see it. I haven't got a clue, like many of the residents living in the area. I don't think that would be necessary now if I know it's coming to scrutiny.
Yeah.
And that would be better to be dealt with a confidentiality rather than the local area committee.
Yeah.
The reason we're taking the local area committee, of course, Chairman, was it involved all the southeast. But although I represent Sleeper, I realise the significance to everyone.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we've people who were important. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, just to intervene again. So on that basis, what we might want is something on Energy Central that gives you in public, because that would be appropriate, some summary of what's going on in Energy Central. I'm sure that would be very useful to you, and then maybe a commercial part to that report that discusses the specific area around Netflix. That's right.
That's really good.
As we suggest, us to have a chat with the officers, and then obviously give that me and Sean know what you're going to be doing on the agenda. Right, okay, thanks. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, could I just also, if I may, ask not only for Energy Central, Richmond as it was, but about the whole of regeneration in our areas, because there are areas of regeneration that we are concerned about that's perhaps been put back in, you know, like on the back burner. Lincoln, Ashington, and all things is happening, but it would be also nice, even if it's on pink papers, to find out exactly what's going on.
Well,
And then when it comes to, you know, the open sessions, and then at least then if it's open sessions after that, we can inform our residents as what's going on for firsthand instead of reading on Facebook, etc. And first of all, or via the newspaper, and the councillors don't know anything about, we're just getting information the same time as everybody else is. If you don't mind, Chair.
Yeah, it's fine.
Really appreciate it.
Part of today's session with the directorates is to flag up areas that we think we might want to look into. If any members do have a particular regeneration scheme that they want a report on, then obviously let me know, and I think we can request that. What Simon's presentation did suggest, a few of the big ticket items they're doing, and obviously all regeneration falls within our remit. If there's any particular scheme, you know, a smaller scheme or a local scheme for a member, or then let me know, we'll see if we can get a report on that. That's part of the new scrutiny is going to be us deciding what we want to look at.
Yeah.
So, you know, please let me know if you do.
Okay.
Right,
I think Simon's put his hand up.
so Simon's got his hand up. Oh, yes. I can see you in the hand.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to suggest part of my suggestion of a regeneration update as a comprehensive is we can bring an update on every single piece of work that we're involved in, not every single down to the fine detail, but a broad programme of everything we're doing across the county. So then you can select from that if there are areas you would like a deeper look at in future. So if that is the will of the committee, we can arrange for that update to come, and then you can select things that you might want to look at in your future work programme from there.
That's a brilliant idea, thanks, Sam. Okay, that's we've done that one. So it's Jan's presentation now. So Jan, into you.
Thank you, Chair. So, like Simon, I just laid out an overview of the new directorate structure. If we can go to the next slide, please. In the new senior management structure, I have 3 directors. And below those, a number of heads of service, 3 reporting to the Director of Finance and Procurement. So we have Pam Hindhoff, who's leading on corporate commissioning and procurement. We've created a new head of service role for transactional services, which will bring together things like accounts payable, accounts receivable, revenues and benefits, insurance, and I think over time we may well see other transactional type services migrating into that area, and a new role of head of corporate finance. As you're aware, we're strengthening sort of the corporate finance function, and we're out to advert for that post as well. In Chris Thompson's area, we have 3 head of service roles, 1 dealing with data and business intelligence, 1 dealing with technology and infrastructure, and 1 digital. And then the final part of the structure is transformation, strategic change, service review and improvement, headed up by Kelly Gardner, and she has Hannah as her head of service supporting her. So I don't think there's anything in Transformation and Resources Directorate that doesn't align to scrutiny by this committee. There may be little tiny bits and pieces here and there, but it's pretty straightforward. I think that anything that we do falls within the purview of this committee. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. I've picked out some potential areas of focus. The first is obviously delivery of our programme of work, supporting best new ways of working, and that encompasses a number of areas. So as well as having regular updates on how we're progressing with the delivery of that work, there are potentially some areas for deep dives. So under the best value work stream, for example, we're developing a new performance and accountability framework and doing a lot of work around baseline value for money assessments, developing our best value improvement action plan. We're also doing a lot of work around data and business intelligence. There is the best use of assets, where we're initially piece of work's been completed around the asset management framework, but a lot of work looking at reviewing things like our depots and our other operational assets, our offices, to look at how we could reduce the overall cost and make better use of those assets. We have a work stream which is around leadership, culture, values, behaviour, workforce development. Lots of issues there that the committee might want to get to have a look at in more detail. Obviously, technology, best use of technology and services to customers. A lot of that is around digital enablement and of our services, but it's also about how we redesign all of our processes to make it quicker, easier for customers to access the services that they need. And there's another work stream that I've forgotten. Anyway, I won't go on any further. Just to say that, you know, delivery of that programme is going to be really important, and that's why I've suggested it as something to be on the agenda, perhaps on a rolling basis for this committee. And next area I've picked out is wholly owned council companies. So we have a new shareholder committee which has been established. We're planning for the first meeting of that committee in July, and this committee clearly has an important role to play in holding the executive to account for the way that it is managing wholly owned companies. So the scrutiny of Advance Northumberland will be done predominantly through the shareholder committee, exercising the shareholder function, but there's also an important role for this committee. And there is a particular piece of work which is in progress and will be reporting back through the shareholder committee, hopefully in July, although that's not entirely clear that it will be ready in time for that first meeting, which is about looking at the financial structure of Advance. And again, you know, that's something that this committee might want to look at specifically. Obviously, we have the medium-term financial plan, which is always a key area of focus for this committee. But we have given a commitment to do some further work to develop a richer budget engagement and consultation process. And we have a policy conference planned for July, and I would expect some proposals to come out of that policy conference. So I think there is a role for this committee in looking at those. And same with the council tax support scheme, something which always provokes a lot of debate and discussion here. As universal credit is being progressively rolled out, it is timely for us to start thinking about how we might redesign that scheme to make it easier for people to navigate, because it is very complex and time consuming, but also to ease the administrative burden. So there's some work going on that behind the scenes that the committee might want to take an early look at. And then the final one that I've suggested is digital access. And this is not so much the work that we're covering best, but it's about how we're building that digital access infrastructure. So rolling out broadband and connectivity to our schools and across the county, and particularly in some of the harder to reach rural areas. So there's a lot of money and a lot of time and effort going into that at the moment. I thought that might be another area. And then one which I did miss off the slide, but I will also throw into the mix, is looking at capital programme delivery. So we always have issues with capital programme slippage, and that's now compounded with some of the intense inflationary pressures that we're seeing on the capital programme. and the state of the supplier market, you know, with the capacity not being there to deliver everything that we'd like. So I thought that was something again that the committee might want to have a look at in a bit more detail. Thank you, Chair. I'll stop there and take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Jan. So, comments or questions? Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Jan, your question generally. We highlight commissioning procurement as something we needed to tackle straight away with the best programme, basically. Is that work progressing?
Yeah, sorry, that was the other work stream that I couldn't remember. The best work stream. It's best commissioning and procurement, and a lot of that also is about developing our communities first work programme, which plays into the theme of developing resilience and community capacity. So through the BEST programme, you will get a lot of information about what we're doing around commissioning and procurement, because it's one of the major work streams.
Now, another area we were certainly dipping our toes in, shall we say, was selling our intellectual assets, if you like, our experience. Are we still looking to do that?
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said. Selling
our intellectual assets, if you like, our experience, our expertise, you know.
Yeah, so yeah, commercializing some of that. I think that will come out of some of the work that we're doing. Best use of assets, we're looking initially at physical assets, but that does fall under the best use of assets work stream in BEST. What other assets could we leverage? So intellectual property is one example of that, and you know, and our expertise and knowledge. If we were to do that, then that would then have to play into the shareholder committee, because if we're doing things for a commercial purpose, then we'd have to do them via a company. But yeah, I think one of the things that I would say about the BEST programme of work is that it's a 3-year minimum programme, and we can't do everything in year one. So some of those things we would look at, but they're not an immediate priority for the next 12 months. Unless we come across a fabulous immediate opportunity, of course, which you know, we might want to fast track. But at the moment, that's not planned to be a major area of focus.
Well, we thought we'd done that, but look what happened to that. You talked about capital programmes and our failure to deliver them succinctly, if you like. Now, from my perspective, what I can see is the council's deficit seems to be paid off by the lack of delivering these capital projects. And, you know, I made the point to the council, I consider my town were paid 3 years worth of county council deficits because of a failure to spend that money in my town. And because it's an annual budget, if you don't spend it, you lose it, and that goes on the other side of the account balance. So if you're going to deliver 100% of the capital projects, are you sure we'll be able to balance the budget? Is basically my question.
Yeah, ordinarily, if there's slippage in delivering capital projects, the resources carry over. We reprogram, and we do that on a continuing basis. So the funding is not lost. I'm not sure what deficit you're referring to, but we certainly, well, number one, we don't have a budget deficit, and number two, we don't use capital resources to, you know, to supplement the revenue budget. They're entirely distinct. But we do have, and have had for a number of years, a significant amount of over programming, by which I mean, you know, that we plan for more schemes than we can actually deliver. And with the post-COVID legacy, how that's impacting on the supply market and inflation, we are seeing that problem escalate. So last year, we had a very significant amount of capital programme slippage, but we have significant, slippage every year. So this is about looking at the underlying reasons for that, so that we can, have more certainty about capital programme delivery. Because, I think we all appreciate that it's frustrating, when you think projects are going to be delivered, and then there are delays, and escalating costs, which mean that, we have to keep going back to the drawing board and looking at value engineering to see how we can bring the scope of projects back within the funding envelope. So some of this is about better forecasting. Some of it's about having the right resources in place to ensure that we can deliver. And in particular, it goes back to the point that Simon was making. We have a huge programme of large infrastructure projects, regeneration projects, and our capacity to manage those on the client side is spread very thinly. So there's a whole range of issues, and some of it is also about just the quality of forecasting and profiling. So we do need to look at all of that, so that, if we set a capital programme of 100 million, we might not spend exactly 100 million, but it will be something in that ballpark. And the other reason why that's important is because we budget for the revenue costs of servicing the debt associated with the capital programme. If we're continually over programming from a capital perspective, that means that we're also budgeting for revenue costs which don't then materialise. So, the consequence of that is that we are having to look for revenue savings that are not strictly necessary. So it's about understanding the interaction between capital budget and the revenue budget as well, and making sure that they're properly aligned.
It's the comment really done that understand the capital works programme and that with all the programmes to be delivered. And I'm also probably an awkward question to ask you, but how confident are you this year that perhaps, like the markets with regards to the costs of materials and the contractors, etc. How confident are you that we could deliver some programmes within the budget, or do you think that we have to have a contingency plan just in case that they're still rising vastly, but we want to deliver some of these programmes? Or would we have to cut back even further in the capital works programmes? Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. John?
Yeah, so we do have a capital programme inflation contingency that we included when we set the capital programme. So as those increased costs come through, we are able to draw down from that contingency. To be perfectly honest, I think the bigger issues are whether we have the right in-house capacity to manage the capital programme, and the fact that in some instances there just isn't the capacity in the market at all at any price. So there is a really significant supply side issue, and we're having to rethink not only sort of like the timing, but also the scope and the approach to some of those projects. It's making what's always a difficult task in terms of landing a capital programme of the size of Northumberland's. It's making that task even more difficult.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, we've got a contingency plan. Sorry, Chair, what I should have said, but is there scope for putting more money into that to deliver the projects under the circumstances? Sorry, Chair, I should have said that. Didn't come across.
So at the moment, we think that the contingency that we have is adequate, but obviously we're keeping a really close eye on that. And given the amount of slippage, you know, we have plenty of scope, you know, for managing sort of any in-year pressures if that contingency doesn't prove to be adequate. But clearly the consequence of that is that if schemes get slipped to future years, that we then need to find more funding further down the line. But you know, there's not a lot that we can do about those issues which are more sort of supply side. I think, you know, the things that are within our control are the things that we should be focusing on, and that is, you know, our delivery, whether we have the right delivery capacity, and whether we have accurate forecasting and monitoring processes in place.
Thank you. Alex, thanks for you.
Thanks, Chair. A comment, please, and then a question. A comment that do not want to open a debate that caused a lot of wounds, I would say, for this local authority for many years, and that is just 2.93 million quid to replace defective street lanterns. We must have an awful lot of defective street lanterns, and I hope it's resolved very quickly. But my main point is, it's an exhaustive report with some massive sums of money, but my question's on a very small amount. And it's on £250,000 for parks and green spaces to supplement an enhancement capital programme. And it was money that wasn't spent.
On the next report. Yeah.
Oh, I do apologise. What a shame, because I'm sure Jan would.
Oh,
I prepared you the
research well.
Sorry.
Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's the next report. Just in terms of this council is very fortunate that it has received an awful lot of funding from central government for projects in Ashington, in Bedlington, with Boardlands, with all sorts of with the Northumberland line, with the line for Israel potentially, and others. We're definitely focused on making sure that we've got the delivery capacity. The addition of Ashington earlier in the year is obviously added some work that we need to do in the next 2 years, and we're determined that we get that under control. I think China's given an excellent presentation, and I don't propose to supplement virtually at all, other than to welcome all of the topics that you talked about. Best is really important for this council, and it would be really valuable for you all to sort of drill into the detail of that and work out and make sure that that's going well, in particular. On the council tax support bit, you'll see more about that in due course. And again, it would be good if we can have cross-party consensus on what that looks like in the future, so that we can all have some sort of early settlement on that in advance of the budget. And one thing that you might want to consider, certainly John and I have been talking about, and hopefully you mind me saying it here, in terms of capital programme, is we get this slippage because you have to kind of, if you've got a project, let's say it's a schools project, and you've got £40 million or whatever going into it, it's often going to cut across maybe 2 or even 3 financial years, and you won't find a home for it in the capital programme. But our medium-term financial plan invariably is 3 years rolling. And maybe it's the case that we want to map out a bit further into the future and have a bit more of a plan, and again, a bit more of a consensus across any potential administration. And obviously, we would hope that that would be our administration. You would hope that it would be your administration, for example, Councillor Grimshaw. But there was some consensus so that the council and its financing knew what the plan for and what there was a core belief that we had to do across the county, and then it would be for administrations to refine that and put things forward in their budgetary proposals. So that's something that we may see from forward as well.
Thank you. Right, I think we're with that one, so now we'll move on to the next item, which is item 7, which is the financial performance position visual outline. So Jan,
I'll do a bit on that.
oh, you can start that. Yeah, that's fine.
The presentation for that first item, obviously, was very much their suggestions to ultimately is my report. I'll go through some of the recommendations. Obviously, this is the council to cabinet on the 9th of November. And so you're receiving this, following on from that, and happy to answer any questions that you may have. The big headline, bit, in terms of £5 million that was carried forward from Stream Ukraine. We've got 2.9 million there on destructive and unaffected street lanterns, and that's basically in answer to Councillor Wallace's question, if I'm understanding correctly. You can feel free to correct me, but this is effectively the end of our contract with the people who install the lanterns, and this is to make sure that this fund is available for any defects going forward after that contract is concluded. And it concluded a little time ago. We have £250,000 to create a reserve for parks and enhancement, with something that the leader has been very keen to have, and a reserve created of 1.127 million for highways maintenance. And then in addition, I think that if I'm recalling this paper correctly, you have some of the underspend. So we set aside in the, not this year's budget, but the year before, a sum of money to cover contingency in the case that we had significant inflationary pressures. We did have some inflationary pressures, but of the money that we put aside, there was about £2.1 million that was remaining that needs to move on, and so we put 1 million into exceptional inflation reserve and 10 million into key economic growth and so on, and then £100,000 for reserve for fluctuations on external funding in the years to come. So those are the headline bits, and then you've got as well some capital reprogramming. We talked about that a little bit already. These papers, when you receive them and see them go into the cabinet and to here, are really about the budget is set in February, but it's a moving target right the way through the whole period of the budget, and we have to move bits of it around and make it fit best and easy. Effectively, what this does is sets the position at the end of February, I believe, was end of year as well. Jan.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Jan, as which is just indicates, this is the position is as at February, but I think it has moved a bit since then.
Yeah, due to the timing of this committee meeting, we have got a little bit out of sync with looking at the quarterly budget update. So the final outturn position will be going to Cabinet on the 11th of July. So the position set out in this paper was at a particular point in time in February. We now have the final outturn position, and there's a further report for Cabinet on the 11th of July, which says that the underspend has increased further. So there, there will be some further proposals to set aside that underspend to give us a bit more resilience in year if it's needed.
Yes, thanks, Jan. I mean, we know from this report, it's great that we've got this net underspend of 2.1 million, and that will increase again come when we get the July one. My worry is when we get these reports, that the narrative on the bottom is almost, you could think that it had been cut and paste in there from month to month. And it always has the underspend is due to vacancies in this department or posts not filled. So when do we get to a position when we haven't got these vacancies and posts not filled? And how do we track that?
Actually, Jan may wish to answer, but just obviously, there's always vacancies where we have thousands of people working in this organisation. Some vacancies are really easy to fill, others more challenging. You will see an element of copy and paste in this as well. And I think that's the reason for that really is because, of course, you start off at the start of the year and often themes evolve and continue right the way through the year. So there wouldn't be a purpose in trying to tell a different story about the same thing, because it's the same thing that happens in a pattern right way through the year, whether it's vacancies, whether it's the capital programme slipping or moving, or whether it's inflation, or whether it's one department that might be spending a little bit more money than it might have been envisaged in the initial budget. But January had something that you might like to have, of course.
Yeah, so I think there's a few issues to unpack here. One is that early on in the year, when we were looking at a potential overspend of about 17 million, one of the strategies that we introduced was to not to freeze recruitment, but an internal process to review all vacancies. And what we asked hiring managers to do was to consider whether they could defer recruitment to certain vacancies for a period of 3 months, 6 months, in order to generate a bit of a saving on the salary budget, or to look at filling those vacancies in other ways. So, for example, by using apprentices, restructuring, reallocating sort of resources, etc. So some of it was deliberate, that we set out to create some headroom in the staffing budget by managing vacancies more tightly. And some of it is just due to the state of the recruitment market, that we haven't been able to recruit to all sorts of roles. And also we've, in some areas we've seen much higher turnover than we would normally expect. I think in adult social care, there have been particular issues with turnover and recruitment difficulties, notwithstanding that, we have put, incentives in place to ease those. Yeah, I mean, I would hope that as the labour market, sort of starts to stabilise and return to normality, because it is very, very tight at the moment, and it's not just us that are experiencing this. It's right across the economy, but certainly is affecting all councils. I think that will help us. That will help us. But we also, I think, need to look at our employer offer and in order to recruit, people, and that is something which we are taking forward through BEST. Simon is leading on that particular work stream, so there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes on that. So yeah, it's difficult, and underspends on salary budgets. I think will continue for some time to come, to be perfectly honest.
So that work is something that could come back to this committee, that what you said, Simon, was and stuff like that. Yeah, because at the end of it, what you've also got to bear in mind is the impact that it has on our existing workforce. You've got to go for their well-being as well.
We are getting a workforce report on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's an example of an area of BEST that you might want to have more of a deep dive into, and if there are other areas like that, then we can make sure that we present the right information to you, so that you can pick out those things.
Next.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, and I'll just ask them all at once. They're very brief.
Yeah.
I'll steal Alex's thunder. I have the same question about the defective streetlights. Is that rework of the streetlight modernisation programme? Shall I just fire through all of them, or do you want to take them one by one?
Let's take them one by one.
Yeah, okay,
That's a really quick answer to that.
Yeah.
Well, then you got the answer.
Go on, John, challenge you to have
It's a sinking fund. We're creating a sinking fund so that the funding is available to pay for any defective columns over a 20-year period.
Brilliant, thank you. On page 20, there's £1 in for regen reserve. I assume that's 1 million. But what's that being used for?
that is just topping up the regen reserve to cover, for example, a project like Ashington coming in, or there's other projects that will come in.
Is it extra people capacity to deliver the
No,
projects, or is it actually?
that's capital being set aside. It's not additional people.
It's
additional
capital, is it?
right in part of the budget. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Page 37, there's a weighted interest rate for investments, but there isn't a weighted interest rate for borrowing. And obviously with PWLB rates going through the roof, it might be useful to have that in future, and also a sort of trend analysis on that, because that presumably is an important factor, the cost of our borrowing. So that's not a question, that's just a statement, but yeah. And then the last two are kind of linked. On page 46, 40% of the savings targets haven't been met. And then on page 48, there's a £4.8 million overspend in adult services. I think the two are linked because the two things are effectively the same area. When we last talked about this, we talked about the stretching savings targets. We also talked about how staff had been used in other areas to help with sort of delivering sort of recovery post-COVID. Is that returning to normal now?
So on the Treasury management, we're only borrowing. Sorry, we're not undertaking any external borrowing at the moment. We're pursuing an internal borrowing. So I think that's why there isn't a figure for the weighted cost of external borrowing. On savings, yeah, there was a particular issue in adults that we reported during the year, which was that the team that were responsible for doing the reviews of the individual care packages were diverted to deal with the pressures on home care, particularly in the west of the county, and that's the reason why they weren't able to deliver those savings, but there were savings, other savings in adult social care to offset them, and in the current financial year, the position stabilised and those savings are back on track. Adult social care underspent overall, so clearly there were other things to take up the slack there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Just going back to Councillor Dunn's comments with regard to staffing, and I would just like to know, is there any impact that's having on actually the service delivery with these vacancies that stand at the office at the moment, and especially I've seen in the social care in children's, which are very worrying because they're the most vulnerable people that we look after in this county, and I'm very worried about that because for recruitment, etc., and foster care, still employing people out of the county, because I know we did this a few years ago to see why couldn't it be in-house, and one of the issues that we did look at was training, and I don't know if we still deliver because I'm not on the children's board anymore, and we do the children's side, but we were looking at perhaps with the training, when we have in-house training, then having like a contract to say, well, if you were in foster care and you did various training for the wheelchair ability, same social care that we have, then you have to have a contract to say that if you left within a certain period of time, then you have to pay all these fees back that we paid for to get your training to the best of his ability to do to deliver. But I'm finding that I would probably still do a lot with adult social care and children's services. The wages that some of these people are paying out, unfortunately, and I think that's quite a bone of contention, but it's still very, very worrying with the adult social care and children's social care. Sorry, Jen, I wanted to know.
No, that's fine. Okay. Jan, so basically, is there an issue about delivery of services due to vacancies or not? Or we can detect?
well, I mean, clearly it's difficult when you're carrying a significant number of vacancies. I think what we are doing generally is prioritising sort of day-to-day service delivery, and the thing that isn't getting done is some of the developmental work. But I don't have those performance statistics, at my fingertips. They, as we've acknowledged, performance, adults and children's performance is dealt with through some of the other scrutiny committees, Health and Wellbeing Board and the Children's Service, Family and Children's Services scrutiny. But again, if that's something which the committee would like to look at in more detail, we can bring forward some information for you at your next meeting.
Very grateful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just a couple of questions for you. The first one, sort of like just to take you back to the payroll forecast on page 24. I'm assuming that will change if you fill these vacancies.
Sorry, Councillor, just bear with me while I find page 24 in my agenda pack so I can see the comment that you're referring to. Oh, okay, yes. Yeah, so this, because this is a backward-looking report, it's showing the position at the end of February. That financial year is finished now. The issue that we've got in the current financial year is we don't yet know what the final pay award is going to be. It's looking as though it's going to be higher than we expected. That will feed into our overall sort of payroll forecast. So it's a combination of things. It's about how many posts are filled. It's about how much you're paying people, because there is some flexibility in terms of when we're making new appointments, at what point on the salary band they're appointed. And it's also about the pay award. So sorry, and the staffing mix also will feed into that. It's very early in the financial year. It's only, we're only at the end of June, so we haven't yet got a full quarter's data in. But I think some of the pressures, in terms of recruiting, seem to be easing. That might not be uniform right across the piece. But certainly we're finding it easier, I think. And there has been a focused piece of work around the employer value proposition and how we do recruitment, to try and attract more candidates. So I'm hopeful that we will see some improvement, with a lower level of vacancies. But in the meantime, we are where we are. I think it's likely that those pressures will continue for some time, but the silver lining, of course, is that it does help in terms of helping to offset some of those other non-staffing related inflationary pressures on the budget. It's not where we'd want to be, but but it's helpful in that regard.
Can I just ask, sort of like redundancies? I've read recently that there's going to be a number of redundancies, although I haven't had anything official from the council. Do we look at, before we offer redundancies, do we offer at offering other vacancies to those people within the council?
I'm not sure what redundancies you're referring to. There are some. Sorry.
Youth provision.
Okay, well, I was going to say there are some areas which were agreed as part of the budget where we would be changing the service model, and that would result in some redundancies. And the short answer is we follow an agreed process. So we have a management of change policy where people are at risk. We look for suitable alternatives. If we're unable to make a suitable alternative offer of employment, then people are made redundant. But redeployment and retraining. There's a whole host of different measures that are looked at before redundancy is confirmed.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Jeff.
Well, sorry, more.
I better ask me a question, because John will be waiting for it.
Oh, yes, yes.
No,
We
no,
need to be patiently, go on.
now I'm on the right page. It's very simple. I mean, it's a report full of some managing big numbers. So I'm only talking about £250,000 here. It's on page 19. And I welcome the fact that they're creating a reserve of £250,000. It's the improving parts, it's good for mental health, the well-being of our communities. But it would have been good in 22 to 23 as well, and it wasn't spent. And I just wonder, when Malcolm, Christine and I sit in support groups for putting in bids to borderland to look at the country parks in Bedlington, the nature reserve in Bedlington, and sadly, it's a capital programme when it's boots on the ground that's really needed. We've mentioned today revenues and the difference between revenue and capital, but people are referring to redundancies and more work and that. And it's very simple. A lack of manpower is not keeping those parks and those country parks in particular up to the standards they should be. And what worries me is when it says utilisation of this reserve is delegated, I can just put in one word there, trees. Because that's a capital programme, trees. And I did hear the deputy leader say the leader was keen on putting in additional money to parks and green spaces. So I've got to ask Jeremy a question. Two-parter, Chair, if I may. Are we thinking trees? And why was the money not spent in 22-23, please?
Okay, that's done.
Okay, I don't think it's trees. I think what we're talking about here is things like footways, and sort of some of that hard landscaping in the parks and open spaces. I don't know the specific reasons why not all of the parks enhancement money was spent in 22-23, but I can find out. I don't know, Simon might know, but we're reprofiling and carrying the funding forward to 23-4. I suspect that it's another example of where due to various issues with tenders coming back much higher than expected and having to revisit and reprioritise the programme, and just general delays that resulted from that we just couldn't spend the money in time.
Thanks, Chair. Can I say thank you? Can I say thank you for this report? Because it really is an exhaustive report. People must put hours and hours into this. And can I also say and put on record, when I watch television and I see parks and green spaces throughout the country being closed, that is really good to see additional money being put into ones. But don't forget, Bedlington's in Northumberland, so if you want to spend it there, it's not a problem. Thank you.
I think Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask Richard for this topic. Page 21, link the corporate plan. 3.2, driving significant investment to promote economic activity in the county. Now, is that existing programs or is that a new program, Jen?
So this is just a reference to the old corporate plan. It's been superseded because we now have a new corporate plan that was agreed by council last month. So these are the old priorities which are just being lifted from the old corporate plan.
Semantics, really, then, Chair. Page 23, the second last word fund, supplying the incentive scheme review contracts. and request better value from their suppliers. Are we requesting better value from ourselves? Because I look at some of the local improvement schemes I'm trying to get done, and our quotes are off the map. I mean, 3-4 times private sector sort of money. You know, so we really need to look at ourselves as well in that.
Yeah,
Well,
I wouldn't- sorry, did
Well,
you
last
want me
one,
to?
Well, my last point is on the very next page, page 24, waste BFI underspend due to lower waste volumes. Now that seems counterintuitive. There's more and more houses, more and more people. There must be more waste. So how on earth are we getting underspend due to lower waste volumes?
as I say.
Don't understand.
Okay, Jan?
Okay, so so on the first point, you're absolutely right. You know, that we need to be looking at value for money across the piece. This was a specific thing that we asked managers to do, because we know that in many cases contract management is not as strong in the council as it should be. Should be a continuous dialogue with our key suppliers about how we can work with them to deliver better value. Some of that might be about, you know, what can we do to reduce the cost, or it might be about what can we do to just deliver more value overall. But value for money is not just about, you know, our external suppliers. It's also about how we deliver services. And in the current year, every service will be undertaking a baseline value for money assessment. This is a major component of the best value for money work stream of BEST. And it's something which my team, you know, working really closely on. And I think that will hopefully tell us where we're doing well in terms of delivering value for money, and where the improvement opportunities are. And that needs to be a continuous improvement process. So I think you'll be hearing a lot more about that over the coming year.
Can I ask you about the waste? That waste.
Oh, the waste PFI. Sorry, on the waste PFI, I don't think you should read that necessarily as the volumes have reduced. Just they haven't increased as much as we forecast.
Okay, good, slower, okay. Liz?
Yeah, and if I can just come back to the parks issue again, that Councillor Wallace raised. I think we need to have a better understanding of why these projects didn't take place last year. And it is this slippage that we talked about. For instance, I mean, the Queen Elizabeth Park, residents were informed months and months and months and months ago that this was coming off, the plans were put out. And when it doesn't happen, their expectations are just dashed, and it does not do well for this, you know, that's not the look this council should have. So if they're not going to happen, I think it's important that people know why they're not happening and have a sort of estimate of when they will come up, because, you know, this has been in the offing for months and months and months, and people just say, well, yeah, we'll promise this, but it never happens. And that isn't the attitude that we need.
So, well, is that particular request for Elizabeth Park?
Yes.
Yeah, well, in that case,
And any other one
Yeah.
for Alex?
but if we can maybe have a short report on what's happening with that project.
Yeah, I mean, the plans for the pathways and everything have been there for months. Nothing happens, and it just, you know.
Yeah, okay, do we have that? What?
Yes.
Yeah, just a short report, update, yeah. Go on then.
Chair, to start on that, I've got 2 projects at the moment going on in Plessy Woods.
Yeah.
And we're looking for external funding, you know, and I've identified and we're trying to access it. But with this underspend, with this enhanced funding, my 2 schemes could go ahead without a shadow. So I could spend them. If nobody else can spend them, John, I'll spend them.
Okay, the bidding war.
I understand it is that that's the other for certain places that it's stepping up.
Yeah. Right, Okay, I'm not sure we can have a bidding war for the. Right, so I think well, thank you very much for that report, and as Alex said, I think it's a minute hour, thanks to the officers for putting together such a comprehensive report.
Yeah.
And obviously, we look forward to the updated figures and due course when they're available. Right, so next thing on the agenda is debt recovery update. Now that's, Keith, I assume, set to give us an overview.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes. Members, this is an update that comes to scrutiny twice a year. The report is halfway point of the year and then the end of the financial year. This report gives a snapshot of the outstanding debt across various debt streams as of the 31st of March gone. It's broken down into.
Let's check, sorry, so has everyone got a copy of this report?
No.
Yeah.
No.
No.
Yes.
Right.
Sure.
What's that one?
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a report that comes twice a year to scrutiny. This report gives a snapshot of the debt position as of the 31st of March across various debt streams. I'll be very, very brief. Sundry debt, there has been an increase in the outstanding sundry debt as at the end of March. There was a comment in the report about the adult social care debt. What has affected that or the reason for the increase. Council tax, there has been an increase in the overall arrears. However, the collection rate for last year was 97.3. It was 0.1% down on the previous year. We are still recovering from the COVID-19. There's still a legacy from that, and it will take time to fully recover. But we've also got the current cost of living, which is impacting on collection. Something for members to note, and that's that in Northumberland, we did have the highest council tax collection rate of 11 North East councils. So that is particularly the teams, that's testament to the work that we do. Business rates, again, there has been an increase in arrears. Collection rate is down slightly down a little bit on the previous year, and it was below the North East average of 11 other councils. We are at council tax recovering from COVID pandemic still, and recovery will take some time. As well, within Northumberland, we have a lot of small properties making up small parts of the business rates income, whereas in some of the neighbouring authorities, they have huge properties which contribute a significant amount into the rates pot. Within Revs and Bens generally, we did have a service review in 22-23. I've gone through an improvement exercise, and we are starting to see staff just coming into post now. Staff have been working on the COVID grants, various COVID grants, as well as backlogs. Housing benefit overpayments, again, briefly. In the last financial year, the team collected 64.9% of the overpayments identified. There has been a little bit of a reduction in the recovery rates. That's because claims are gradually moving on to universal credit, which limits some of the recovery options that are available. Previously, when claimants were on ongoing housing benefit overpayments could be clawed back by reducing their ongoing benefits slightly, but with the move to universal credit being a state benefit, if I can call it that, that option's not there. The housing benefit overpayment team as well, they have the third lowest level of overpayments of the 11 North East councils. So again, 15 that's really good. Housing, the housing team are performing very well. Various areas are reducing. And it's excellent. The payments have been the impact of the loss of credit and obviously COVID. And one final point with the housing team, the officers continue to work with tenants to try and support and ultimately reduce the arrears ongoing. Chair, that's a very brief overview.
Thank you very much. And good to know that we're benchmarked against the Liberal councils with their performance forward. Any questions or queries on it?
I've got a question about council tax, and it's not this per se, but after what I'm saying, let's suppose we've got somebody with a problem with council tax that in all likelihood the outcome is going to be it's not liable. However, it's on the books as being liable. Now, I was working with Graham when he was in post. He's left, and I haven't been able to find anybody else who can help with this particular problem. So, are we sure that all this debt is actually owed? Can we be 100% sure? Because I know one in particular, which I would dispute, but there may be many more.
It's difficult to comment on it.
It's very difficult. I realise that. And on the back of that, can you give me a name? But I think you've got
Chair, I'm happy to advise members that the head of revenues is Gillian Caisley. So if you have any council tax related casework, you should route it through Gillian Caisley.
There's on holiday, Jan, and we've got a force order.
Okay, well, if for any reason Gillian's not available, I'm very happy for members to email me and I will make sure that it's allocated to somebody who can look into it and get back to you.
Thank you. So my question stands, are we 100% sure that this is actual money that is owed? I mean, it's been rigorously tested that, you know, it's gone through all the hoops and jumps it's got to make sure that these people do all that money.
Yeah, it is, as I say, it's a snapshot as of the 31st of March. Yeah. From the revenue systems. That's what this is outstanding at that time. But it's a constantly moving target, and things can impact on the figures of debt, you know, by the minute, by the day, etc. But it was a snapshot. But
this is a snapshot.
Anything can happen afterwards, and they may change.
And this is a snapshot of what the council thinks it's owed as of that date.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Chair, if I may, sorry, if I may just say, Councillor Robinson, I'm not able to put my hand on my heart and say that we get everything absolutely right 100% of the time. In individual cases, there may be billing errors, there may be, missing information, whatever. So we're always happy to review any cases that are referred to us and rebill if we haven't got it right first time. But generally speaking, we do have a very low error rate. So not perfect, but the error rate is pretty low.
Yeah, Chair, I would echo your comments about the benchmarking, and we should congratulate the department and pass our thanks over to staff. Any other people I'd like to thank? it's those who actually pay that council tax. We always quite understandably, you know, when you mention, Keith mentions the cost of living crisis, and we understand it's real and it is affecting people, and it's terrific. The local authority have many schemes. Jan brings them to us in reports to understand of how we can help. But none of us would be here if it wasn't for those 97+% people who put their hands in their pockets every month paying for the services that they get. And sometimes you'll forget the many while trying to protect the few. And I think it's one thing we should really thank them. And congratulate you in being able to get that money in the first instance, because it must be difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just ask a question of Keith? Could I ask if you've got an actual date for the full migration from all the different benefits on universal credit, universal benefit? And then have you forecast any impact that might have? Because obviously there'll be a lot of people within that claims various benefits that will impact severely on. And how will you plan to recover any money that's probably owing because of the circumstances that they'll be under?
I don't know whether January is the help or whether we can do the committee on that question.
Yeah, so we think that it's going to take another 2 years for universal credit to be fully rolled out, but obviously that's not within our gift. But certainly based on the experience elsewhere, and I think by from 25 onwards, I think it will be right at the tail end then. And that's why we're starting to think about, you know, how the council tax support scheme needs to evolve now to, you know, to reflect the fact that universal credit, you know, rollout will be finished in that time period. And yeah, we do we do every year as part of the budget process feed in sort of our latest forecasts of caseload based on what's happened in the previous year, but you know it's very difficult to do that with any accuracy, to be perfectly honest, because as I said, you know, it's the DWP that are driving universal credit rollout, not us. But there will come a point at which, you know, once all that caseload has disappeared, we'll, you know, potentially still be carrying a huge amount of administrative cost, unless we change, you know, change our approach, our systems and our processes. So that's why we're looking at that now.
Thank you. It's just that, you know, yeah, we're looking at the council tax and, you know, the write-offs. And in some instances that are coming down but very slowly, but the write-offs are humongous. I mean, that's the word I probably made up. But the thing is, it still doesn't look good for write-offs on the council. And I'm just worried about that, the impact it'll have in the year or two ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or queries on that one? No? Thank you very much. So next on the agenda, we've got work programme.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Obviously, there's a lot of issues that have been raised in the meeting forum. We have to obviously try and decide for the presentations, the purpose of which was to highlight issues and for members to actually highlight their own priorities. And I think we'll be able to do that in the meeting today. So we'll sift through all of the requests and make sure they're added to the work programme. If there are any issues that haven't been covered in the presentations or the discussions and you want to add those to the work programme, let myself know, the chair, vice chair, we'll look at them and see what we can do.
Good. Thank you. 10 urgent business. I'm not going to board of any. So thank you very much. I'll close the meeting.